President Trump just gave a major update directly from the Oval Office on when exactly he plans to send out those $2,000 tariff rebate checks. But here's the thing that nobody is talking about. When you actually look at the numbers, there's a massive problem. The government would need around $600 billion to send these payments to everyone who qualifies. But so far, only about $200 billion in tariff revenue has been collected. That's a $400 billion shortfall. So how exactly is this going to work? Before I break down everything you need to know about this announcement, including the new timeline, the congressional approval debate, and the Supreme Court case that could throw a wrench in the entire plan, I need to ask you something. If you rely on this channel to cut through the noise and give you honest analysis on stimulus updates and Social Security news, please take 1 second to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. We're working hard to grow this channel and bring you the truth, but we can't do it without your support. Every subscription helps us reach more people who need this information. Now, let's dive into exactly what the president just said. Here's what just happened. In an Oval Office interview with the New York Times published on January 11th, the president was asked directly about the $2,000 tariff rebate checks. The exchange was actually pretty interesting, and I want to break it down for you. White House correspondent Katie Rogers asked, "You promised $2,000 checks to Americans based off of your tariff revenues. When can they expect those?" Now, here's where it got a little confusing. The president initially responded by asking, "I did do that? When did I do that?" He then mentioned the $1,176 payments that went to military service members. And to be fair, he did send those payments. On December 18th, nearly 1.5 million service members received what he called a warrior dividend of $1,176, commemorating the year of American independence. However, and this is important, those military payments came from the big, beautiful bill that Congress passed. They were not from tariff revenue. So the tariff revenue that's been collected is still there, separate from the military payments. The $2,000 stimulus check plan using tariff money is a completely different proposal that has not happened yet. When pressed on the timeline, the president gave us an updated answer. He said, "The tariff money is so substantial that's coming in that I'll be able to do $2,000 sometime, I would say, toward the end of the year." Now, let's put this in context. Previously, the president had said the payments might come around the middle of the year. Some interpreted that as June, July, or August. Now he's pushing that timeline back, saying toward the end of the year. That could mean October, November, or even December. Here's the political reality that everyone needs to understand. The midterm elections happen in November. If Republicans want to maintain control of both the House and the Senate, having these $2,000 checks hit bank accounts before people head to the voting booths would be strategically significant. If Democrats take the majority in either chamber, the last 2 years of this administration would face major legislative obstacles. So when the president says end of the year, I think most people are reading that as before November. The political incentive is clearly there to get these payments out before the midterms. Here's where things get really interesting and potentially complicated. When asked if he would need congressional approval to send out these payments, the president replied, "No, I don't believe so. We have it coming in from other sources." This is a bold claim. Historically, stimulus payments have always required congressional approval. The government can't just send out checks to millions of Americans without legislation appropriating the funds. That's how our system works. However, the president seems to be suggesting that because this money is coming from tariff revenue rather than typical tax revenue, he might have more executive authority to distribute it directly. This is a legal gray area, and not everyone agrees with this interpretation. If the president tries to push through $2,000 payments via executive order without congressional approval, I think it's very likely the Supreme Court would get involved. We saw this happen with Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. He tried to do it via executive action, and the Supreme Court struck it down. The same thing could happen here if proper procedures aren't followed. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room that not enough people are discussing: the actual cost of this proposal versus how much money has been collected. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the government would need approximately $600 billion to issue $2,000 checks to all Americans who would qualify. That includes individuals earning under $100,000 per year and couples earning under $200,000 per year. So how much tariff revenue has actually been collected? According to current estimates, about $200 billion. That's it. That means we're about $400 billion short of what would be needed to fully fund these payments. The president has said that the tariff revenue is substantial enough to send out the $2,000 checks and pay down a significant amount of the national debt. But when you look at the actual numbers, the math simply doesn't add up right now. Either more tariff revenue needs to come in, the payment amount needs to be reduced, fewer people need to qualify, or additional funding sources need to be identified. Something has to give. Here's something that could completely derail this entire plan. There's currently a Supreme Court case challenging whether the tariffs themselves are even legal under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The IEEPA was passed by Congress back in 1977 and gives the president broad authority to regulate economic transactions following a declaration of national emergency. But the question before the Supreme Court is whether using this law to impose tariffs is constitutional. A ruling could come very soon. If the Supreme Court decides that the tariffs are illegal, the Trump administration would have to refund the tariff revenue to the companies that paid it. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent acknowledged this in a January 9th interview with Reuters. He said if the ruling finds the tariffs illegal, the Treasury Department would need to refund nearly $774 billion in collected tariffs. That process could take weeks or even a year to complete. Think about what that means. If the tariffs are struck down, there would be no tariff revenue to distribute as $2,000 payments. The entire foundation of this proposal would collapse. We're waiting on this ruling, and it's a major wild card that could change everything. Let's break down who would actually be eligible for these payments based on what we know. The president has consistently said these payments would go to low-income, moderate-income, and middle-income Americans. High-income earners would be excluded. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent indicated the income threshold would likely be around $100,000 per year for individuals. Couples would presumably have a threshold of $200,000. Anyone earning above those amounts would be completely excluded from receiving the $2,000 payment. On November 9th, the president wrote on Truth Social, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone. The next day, he followed up saying that any money left over after the $2,000 payments would be used to substantially pay down the national debt. For those of you on Social Security or other fixed income benefits, you would almost certainly qualify based on income level. The average Social Security benefit translates to around $23,000 per year, which is well below the $100,000 threshold. Fixed income beneficiaries should absolutely be included based on everything we've heard. I want to share something interesting that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that might surprise you. On November 12th, he told ABC News that he and the president had not actually discussed the possibility of a tariff rebate for the American people at that point. Then on November 18th, in a Fox News interview, Bessent made a comment about what Americans should do if they receive these payments. He suggested, maybe we could persuade Americans to save that. He was concerned about inflation if everyone spent their $2,000 immediately. This raises an interesting point about the administration's internal alignment on this proposal. The president keeps announcing it publicly, but it seems like the details haven't been fully worked out with the Treasury Department, which would actually be responsible for distributing the payments. For this to happen, the Treasury Department, the IRS, and potentially Congress all need to be coordinated. As of right now, we're still mostly dealing with statements and social media posts rather than formal legislation or executive orders with specific implementation details. And there you have it, Truth Lens family. The president has given us an updated timeline of toward the end of the year for the $2,000 tariff rebate checks. He claims he doesn't need congressional approval, but that's legally questionable. The math shows a $400 billion funding gap, and there's a Supreme Court case that could potentially end the tariffs entirely. I want to be completely honest with you. There are a lot of moving pieces here, and nothing is guaranteed. Will these checks actually go out? Honestly, it depends on the Supreme Court ruling, whether Congress gets involved, how much more tariff revenue comes in, and whether the administration can work out the implementation details. There are a lot of ifs here. What I can promise you is this. I'm going to continue monitoring every development and bringing you the truth about what's happening. No hype, no speculation, just the facts as we know them. If you found this breakdown valuable, please hit that like button. It helps this video reach more people who need to understand what's really going on with these proposed payments. Share this video with anyone you know on Social Security or fixed income who's been waiting to hear about these checks. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on this developing story. I'll be here breaking it all down for you. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next video.